Story 1. The Whisper of Pebble Luma. In the heart of the Zen River, where moonlight dances on water and the world hushes its breath, lived a small pebble named Luma. Luma was not like the other stones, who lay quietly at the riverbed. She was curious always, rolling a little to catch a new shimmer, or to feel the coolness of the current. The river's flow was her lullaby, and the stars above her silent companions. One night, as the wind carried the scent of distant pine, Luma felt a gentle nudge from the current. She tumbled softly, landing beside a mossy stone named Vero. Vero was ancient his surface, worn smooth by countless seasons. He greeted Luma with a silent nod, his presence as calm as the river's deepest pools. "Why do you move so much?" Vero asked, his voice barely more than the hush of water over stone. Luma paused, feeling the river's pulse. "I want to know what lies beyond the bend. I want to see the world, even if I am only a pebble." Vero chuckled, a sound like the rustle of leaves. "The world comes to those who wait. The river brings everything in time, but Luma could not be still." Each night, she listened to the stories the river told as it flowed past tales of willows bending low of fish, leaping in moonlight of the crane who visited at dawn. She longed to see these wonders herself. One evening, a sudden rainstorm swelled the river. The current grew strong, sweeping Luma away from her resting place. She spun and tumbled, sometimes frightened, sometimes exhilarated. She glimpsed the willow's silver leaves, felt the brush of a fish's fin, and saw the crane's reflection in the water. Each sight filled her with awe. When the river calmed, Luma found herself nestled beside a new stone, under the arch of a fallen branch. She missed Vero's steady company, but the river's song comforted her. She realized she had become part of a new story, and the river would carry her onward always. As the moon rose high, Luma whispered to the river, "Thank you for showing me the world." The river replied in its endless flow, "You are always home, wherever you rest." And so Luma learned that movement and stillness are both part of the river's wisdom. The journey is not only in the distance traveled, but in the peace found along the way. Story 2. The Lantern of Mizu. Along the banks of the Zen River, where bamboo groves whispered ancient secrets and lotus blossoms opened to greet the evening stars, there lived a paper lantern named Mizu. Each night, when the sun melted into the horizon like honey into tea, gentle hands would light Mizu's wick and set her floating upon the river's peaceful surface. Mizu cherished these moments. The warm glow that emanated from within her rice paper walls felt like a heartbeat, steady and comforting. As she drifted downstream, her light would dance across the water, creating ripples of gold and amber that painted the river in soft luminescence. The fish below would rise to glimpse her radiance, their scales catching fragments of her glow like tiny mirrors. On this particular evening, as Mizu began her nightly journey, she noticed the wind growing restless. The air carried the scent of distant rain, and clouds gathered overhead like thoughtful monks in meditation. Mizu felt her flame waver as the first breeze touched her delicate frame. "Stay strong, little flame," she whispered to herself, focusing on the warmth within. But as the wind intensified, Mizu's light flickered more urgently. She watched other lanterns nearby struggling with the same challenge. Some flames had already surrendered to the darkness, their lanterns drifting empty and cold. Fear crept into Mizu's paper heart. What if her light failed? What if she became just another shadow on the water? The river seemed vast and endless in the growing darkness, and Mizu felt so small, so fragile. Just then, an elderly crane named Hasu landed gracefully on the riverbank nearby. Hasu had watched countless lanterns float past over the years, and she recognized the struggle in Mizu's wavering light. "Little lantern," Hasu called softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of many seasons. "Why do you fight the wind so hard?" Mizu's flame steadied momentarily as she turned her attention to the crane. "I am afraid my light will go out. I want to complete my journey across the river." Hasu nodded thoughtfully, then spread one elegant wing toward the water. "Look around you, child. What do you see?" Mizu looked, and despite her fear, she noticed something beautiful. Other lanterns continued to drift alongside her, their flames also dancing with the wind. Some glowed brightly, others dimly, but together they created a constellation of gentle lights moving across the dark water like fallen stars. "We are not alone," Mizu realized, her voice filled with wonder. "Indeed," Hasu replied. "And notice how your light, even when it flickers, adds to the beauty of the whole. The river carries not just individual lanterns, but a river of light itself." As if in response to this revelation, Mizu felt her flame grow calmer. Instead of fighting the wind, she began to dance with it. Her light would dim and brighten in rhythm, with the breeze creating a gentle pulse that seemed to match the river's own heartbeat. A small frog named Kappa, sitting on a lily pad, noticed Mizu's glow as she passed. "Thank you, bright one," Kappa whispered. "Your light helps me see the insects on the water's surface." Further downstream, a family of ducks, tucked safely in the reeds, called out their gratitude. Mizu's light had helped them navigate safely to their evening roost. With each expression of thanks, Mizu understood more deeply that her purpose was not just to reach the other shore, but to serve as a beacon for others along the way. Her light was a gift she shared with every creature she encountered. As the night deepened, Mizu found herself approaching the bend in the river where her journey would end. Her wick had burned lower, and she knew her time as a lantern was drawing to a close. But instead of sadness, she felt a profound sense of completion. The wind had calmed, and Mizu's flame burned steady and clear. She looked back at the path she had traveled, marked by the grateful creatures she had helped, and the beauty she had added to the night. The river carried her gently toward the bank, where patient hands waited to receive her. As Mizu felt herself being lifted from the water, her flame flickered one last time before going out. But the warmth remained in her paper heart, and she knew that tomorrow night another lantern would take up the journey, adding their own light to the river's endless story. In the quiet darkness, Mizu rested, filled with the knowledge that she had been part of something larger than herself. She had learned that true brightness comes not from burning the brightest, but from joining with others to illuminate the way forward. The lesson Mizu carried into the night. Our individual light may seem small, but when we allow it to join with others, we create something magnificent that guides and comforts all who journey through the darkness. The memory of Stone Jizo, beneath the surface of the Zen River, where sunlight filtered through water in golden threads, and silence held its deepest secrets, sat a smooth stone named Jizo. Unlike the pebbles that rolled with the current, or the larger rocks that anchored themselves firmly, Jizo rested in the gentle space between movement and stillness, worn smooth by countless seasons of flowing water. Jizo possessed a unique gift. He could hold memories. Every creature that touched him, every leaf that settled upon his surface, every drop of rain that kissed his form, left behind a whisper of their story. Over the years, Jizo had become a living library of the river's history, carrying within his stone heart the joys and sorrows of all who had passed by. On this particular evening, as the moon cast silver nets across the water's surface, a young carp named Yuki swam down to the riverbed, her scales shimmering with distress. She circled Jizo several times before finally settling beside him, her fins barely moving, as she fought to stay in place against the gentle current. "I have lost something precious," Yuki whispered, her voice barely audible above the river's soft murmur. My grandmother's last words to me. I was so upset when she passed that I swam away quickly, and now I cannot remember what she said. The memory has slipped away like water through my fins. Jizo felt the young carp's sorrow touch his surface like a cold shadow. He had encountered many such losses over the years, memories that seemed to vanish just when they were needed. Most words that dissolved in the face of overwhelming emotion, moments that slipped away before they could be properly treasured. "Tell me about your grandmother," Jizo said gently, his voice resonating through the water like a deep, comforting hum. Yuki's eyes brightened slightly. "She was the wisest carp in our school. Her scales were silver like moonlight, and she knew all the safe places in the river. When I was very small, she would take me to the shallow pools where the water was warm and show me how to find the sweetest algae." As Yuki spoke, Jizo felt something stirring within his ancient memory. "She sounds like a carp I knew long ago," he said thoughtfully. "Silver scales, great wisdom. She used to rest on my surface when she was young, sharing her dreams of exploring every bend in the river." "That must have been her," Yuki exclaimed, swimming closer. "She told me stories of a wise stone who listened to all the river's secrets." Jizo's surface grew warm with recognition. "Ah, little Yuki, your grandmother touched my heart many times over the years. The last time she visited me, she spoke of you. She said, 'My granddaughter has a brave heart, but worries too much about remembering everything perfectly. Tell her if you ever meet her that love is not held in exact words, but in the feeling that remains.'" Yuki's fins stopped moving entirely, and she sank gently to rest beside Jizo. "She said that about me, indeed. She also said that the most important memories are not the ones we try hardest to keep, but the ones that live in our hearts without effort, like how you remember the warmth of her scales when she swam beside you, or the safety you felt when she guided you to the shallow pools." As Jizo spoke, Yuki began to understand. The exact words her grandmother had spoken might have faded, but the love behind them remained as clear and constant as the river's flow. She could feel it in the way her fins knew how to find the calmest currents, in her instinct to help younger fish, in the confidence that carried her through uncertain waters. "I've been trying so hard to remember her words that I forgot to feel her love." Yuki realized, her voice filled with wonder. Jizo hummed softly in agreement. "Memories are like the river itself. The surface may change, but the deep currents remain constant. Your grandmother's love flows through you, now guiding you just as the river guides us all." A school of small fish swam past, and Yuki noticed how naturally she positioned herself to shelter them from the current, just as her grandmother had once done for her. The gesture came not from remembered instruction, but from inherited wisdom, love made manifest in action. "Thank you, wise Jizo," Yuki said, her distress now replaced by a peaceful understanding. "I thought I had lost her words, but I see now that I carry her heart." As Yuki swam away, graceful and confident once more, Jizo felt a deep satisfaction. He had helped another soul understand that some treasures are not held in the mind, but carried in the spirit, not grasped, but embodied. Other fish began to gather around Jizo, drawn by the peaceful energy that radiated from his weathered surface. They shared their own stories, their own concerns about forgotten moments and lost words. And Jizo listened, as he always did, holding their memories gently while teaching them that the most important things cannot be lost because they become part of who we are. The night deepened and the river sang its eternal song. Jizo rested in his place on the riverbed, grateful for his role as keeper of memories and teacher of hearts. He knew that tomorrow would bring new souls seeking to remember, and he would be ready to help them understand that love once given never truly disappears. The lesson Jizo offered to the flowing night. The most precious memories are not stored in our minds, but woven into our hearts, where they guide us gently forward, even when words fade away. Story 5. The Patience of Reed Suzu in the marshy edges of the Zen River, where water met earth in a gentle embrace, and dragonflies painted the air with their iridescent wings, stood a slender reed named Suzu. She swayed gracefully with every breeze, her hollow stem creating soft melodies when the wind passed through her. Suzu had grown in the same spot for 3 seasons, watching the river's moods change from spring's eager rush to summer's languid flow to autumn's contemplative drift. Suzu possessed a restless spirit that seemed at odds with her rooted nature, while other reeds around her appeared content to bend and sway in harmony. Suzu often found herself straining toward the river's center, yearning to experience the deeper currents she could only glimpse from her marshy home. She watched fish swim freely through the water, envied the lotus blossoms that floated serenely on the surface, and longed to journey beyond the familiar boundaries of her shallow world. On this evening, as purple shadows gathered across the water and the first stars began their nightly vigil, an old turtle named Ganku emerged from the river's depths. Ganku moved with deliberate slowness, each step considered and purposeful. His shell bore the patina of many years, marked with the gentle scars of a life fully lived. He had traveled the length of the river many times, knew its secrets and its dangers, and understood the wisdom that comes only through patient observation. Ganku noticed Suzu's restless swaying, the way she leaned persistently toward the deeper water, despite the roots that anchored her firmly in place. He had seen this longing before in countless creatures who believed that happiness lay somewhere other than where they stood. Young Reed, Ganku said, his voice carrying the measured cadence of deep waters. Why do you strain so against your nature? Suzu's hollow stem hummed softly as she turned her attention to the ancient turtle. I want to experience the river's full depth, to travel with the current and see what lies beyond the bend. But I am trapped here in the shallows, unable to move, unable to truly live. Ganku settled into the mud beside Suzu's roots, his movements creating gentle ripples that lapped against her stem. Tell me, what do you see from your place here? Suzu paused, surprised by the question. I see minnows darting between my neighbor's stems. I see the way morning light filters through the water. I see herons who come to hunt, and ducks who teach their young to swim in our protected cove. And what role do you play in these scenes? Ganku asked patiently. Suzu considered this carefully. The minnows hide among us when larger fish approach. The ducks feel safe, bringing their young here because our roots create a maze that predators cannot easily navigate. The herons use us as cover while they wait for the perfect moment to strike. Indeed, Ganku nodded slowly. And the songs you make when the wind passes through you, who hears those melodies for the first time? Suzu truly listened to the music she created without conscious effort. Her hollow stem caught the breeze and transformed it into gentle notes that harmonized with the water's lapping and the soft rustle of her neighbors. I had not really noticed, she admitted. I suppose all the marsh creatures hear them. Your music calms the nervous fish and lulls the young ducks to sleep, Ganku explained. It has become part of the marsh's evening symphony, as essential as the cricket's chirp or the frog's deep call. As if summoned by their conversation, a small family of ducklings paddled into the cove, their mother guiding them to the safety of the reed bed. The babies cheeped softly as they nestled among the stems, already growing drowsy, as Suzu's evening song began to play on the wind. "But I want to see more, to experience more," Suzu protested, though her voice carried less conviction than before. Genku's ancient eyes reflected the moonlight as he spoke. "I have traveled this entire river, from its mountain source to where it meets the sea. I have seen wonders that would fill your hollow heart with joy. But do you know what I have learned in all my journeys?" Suzu weighted her swaying, now gentler, more attentive. "Every place along the river's path is complete in itself. The mountain spring bubbles with the excitement of new beginnings, but it knows nothing of the marsh's gentle nurturing. The deep center channels carry the river's power, but they cannot shelter the small and vulnerable. The sea receives all waters, but it has forgotten the intimate songs of individual streams." A heron arrived just then, moving with the careful precision that marked her kind. She stepped delicately among the reeds, and Suzu noticed how the bird used her stem as both camouflage and support, leaning against her, while waiting for an unwary fish to swim within range. "Each place serves the river's greater purpose," Genku continued, "and each creature finds their perfect role, not by chasing distant dreams, but by embracing their unique gifts where they are." As the night deepened, Suzu began to understand. She watched a young fish, no longer than her smallest root, dart between the protective maze of reed stems, while a larger predator circled futilely in the deeper water beyond their reach. She felt the gentle vibration of sleeping ducklings, nestled against her neighbors, safe and warm in the shelter they provided. "I have been so focused on what I cannot do that I have not appreciated what I alone can offer." Suzu realized her voice carrying a new note of wonder. "Precisely," Genku affirmed. "The river needs its fast currents and its still pools, its mighty depths and its gentle shallows. You are not separate from the river's journey. You are an essential part of it." A light breeze picked up, and Suzu allowed it to flow through her, naturally creating a lullaby that drifted across the water. She no longer fought against her rooted nature, but worked with it, becoming a perfect instrument for the wind's music. The ducklings settled deeper into sleep, their soft breathing synchronized with Suzu's gentle song. The fish moved in lazy circles, calmed by her melody. Even Ganku's ancient eyes grew heavy as the peaceful harmony filled the cove. "Thank you, wise Ganku," Suzu whispered as the turtle began to drift toward deeper water. "I understand now that my place is not a limitation, but a gift." As dawn approached, Suzu felt a deep contentment she had never known before. She no longer strained toward the river's center, but stood gracefully in her appointed place, swaying with natural rhythm, ready to shelter the small, to sing for the weary, and to play her perfect part in the river's endless symphony. The lesson Suzu discovered in the gentle morning light. True fulfillment comes not from changing our circumstances, but from fully embracing the unique gifts we can offer exactly where we are. Story 6. The Dance of Butterfly Kiku. Above the Zen River, where morning mist rose like incense from ancient temples, and the air shimmered with possibilities, danced a butterfly named Kiku. Her wings were painted in shades of amber and pearl, with delicate patterns that caught the light like stained glass windows. Kiku had emerged from her chrysalis only 7 days ago, and each day since had been a revelation of beauty and wonder that left her breathless with joy. Unlike other butterflies, who seemed content to flit from flower to flower in predictable patterns, Kiku possessed an irrepressible urge to dance. She would spiral high into the air dive toward the water's surface and weave intricate patterns that had no purpose other than the pure expression of her happiness. The other creatures of the river had begun to gather each morning just to watch Kiku's aerial ballet, finding peace in her graceful movements. But on this particular morning, as golden sunlight painted the river in warm honey tones and dewdrops held tiny rainbows on every blade of grass, Kiku felt a strange heaviness in her delicate wings. She had noticed it yesterday, too, a subtle change in her flight, a slight tremor in her movements that had not been there before. Kiku tried to dismiss her concerns as she began her morning dance, launching herself from a lotus bloom toward the sky. But as she attempted her favorite spiraling ascent, she found herself struggling to maintain altitude. Her wings, which had always felt strong and sure, now seemed to require more effort for less result. Fear crept into Kiku's tiny heart, like frost touching flower petals. She had heard whispers among the older insects about the brevity of a butterfly's life, but she had been so caught up in the joy of living that she had never truly considered what that meant. Now facing the first signs of her own mortality, she felt overwhelmed by all the dances she had not yet danced, all the patterns she had not yet painted across the sky. A wise old dragonfly named Tetsu, who had been watching Kiku's struggles from his perch on a cattail, glided over to join her on a floating lily pad. Tetsu had lived through many seasons and had witnessed countless butterflies, each following the same brief but brilliant arc from emergence to fade. "Young dancer," Tetsu said gently, his iridescent wings folding with practiced grace, "I see concern in your movements today." Kiku's antennae drooped as she settled beside him. "My wings feel different, heavier somehow. I am afraid that my dancing days are ending before I have truly begun to live." Tetsu nodded with understanding, his compound eyes reflecting the morning light like tiny jewels. "And what would you do if you could dance forever?" The question surprised Kiku. She had been so focused on her fear of ending that she had not considered what eternal dancing would actually mean. "I would create the most beautiful patterns, I suppose. I would dance for every creature in the forest, bring joy to every corner of the world." "A noble dream," Tetsu agreed. "But tell me, in these 7 days of your life, how many creatures have watched your dances?" Kiku thought carefully, remembering the faces that had turned skyward during her performances. "The fish gather at the surface when I dance over the water. The squirrels pause in their foraging to watch. Even the serious old heron seems to soften when she sees my spirals." "And how did their watching make you feel?" A warmth spread through Kiku's chest as she recalled those moments. "Complete. Like my dance was not just for me, but for all of us together." Tetsu smiled, a gesture barely visible in his insect features, but unmistakable in its kindness. "You speak of dancing for every creature in the world, but you have already danced for every creature in your world. Is that not enough?" As if summoned by their conversation, the morning audience began to gather. Fish rose to the water's surface, their scales catching fragments of sunlight. A family of rabbits emerged from the undergrowth, sitting quietly on their haunches. Birds settled on nearby branches, their usual chatter hushed in anticipation. Kiku looked around at the expectant faces and felt something shift within her understanding. "They are waiting for me," she whispered in wonder. "They are waiting for your dance," Tetsu confirmed. "Not the perfect dance, not the eternal dance, but the dance you can offer today." With newfound clarity, Kiku spread her wings. They still felt different than before, perhaps a bit heavier, but they were still hers, still capable of creating beauty. She launched herself into the air, and this time, instead of fighting against the changes in her body, she danced with them. Her movements were slower than before, more deliberate, but they carried a new depth of expression. Where once she had danced with the exuberance of discovery, now she danced with the poignancy of understanding. Each wing beat became precious, each pattern more intentional. The watching creatures felt the difference immediately. There was something deeply moving about Kiku's dance. Now something that spoke not just of joy, but of gratitude, not just of energy, but of grace. Several of the younger animals found tears in their eyes, though they could not have explained why. When Kiku finally settled back on the lily pad, the audience remained silent for a long moment, as if afraid to break the spell her dance had woven. Then one by one, they began to express their appreciation. The fish with gentle splashes, the birds with soft songs, the rabbits with approving thumps of their hind feet. "That was your most beautiful dance yet," Tetsu observed quietly. Kiku felt a deep peace settling over her, like morning sunlight. "I think I understand now. I was so afraid of my dance ending that I forgot to make it meaningful." "Yes," Tetsu agreed. "And meaning does not come from duration, but from depth, not from quantity, but from quality of presence." As the day progressed, Kiku continued to dance, but with a transformed understanding. Each movement became an offering, each pattern a gift freely given. She no longer danced to prove her vitality or to deny her mortality, but to celebrate the precious present moment and share its beauty with all who cared to witness. The other creatures of the river began to understand something profound as they watched Kiku's transformed performances. Beauty was not diminished by its temporary nature. Indeed, it was the very fact that each dance was unrepeatable and irreplaceable that made it so precious. When evening came, and Kiku settled on a moonflower to rest, she felt no sadness about the approaching night. Tomorrow she would dance again, and each day after that, for as long as her wings would carry her. And when the dancing finally ended, she would rest in the knowledge that she had given everything she had to the moment she was in. The lesson Kiku discovered beneath the evening stars. The value of our gifts lies not in how long we can offer them, but in how fully we share them while they are ours to give. Story 7, The Reflection of Fish Nami. In the deeper pools of the Zen River, where currents slowed to gentle eddies, and water held the sky like a mirror of liquid sapphire, lived a silver fish named Nami. She was known throughout the river for her remarkable beauty scales that shimmered like captured moonbeams, and fins that moved with the fluid grace of silk scarves in a gentle breeze. Nami spent much of her time near the surface, admiring her reflection in the still water and marveling at how the light played across her gleaming form. Nami had always taken great pride in her appearance. Other fish would often pause in their swimming to watch her glide by, and she had grown accustomed to their admiring glances. She kept her scales meticulously clean, her fins perfectly aligned, and her movements deliberate and elegant. In her mind, her beauty was her greatest gift, the thing that made her special among all the creatures of the river. But on this morning, as autumn's first chill touched the water, and leaves began their colorful descent toward the river's surface, Nami noticed something that filled her with distress. A small dark spot had appeared on one of her finest scales, near her dorsal fin. It was barely visible, no larger than a grain of sand, but to Nami it seemed to mar her entire appearance. She spent the morning swimming in tight circles, trying to position herself so that the spot would not show in her reflection. She rubbed against smooth stones, hoping to polish it away. She even tried swimming deeper, where the dimmer light might hide the imperfection. But nothing worked. The spot remained a constant reminder that her perfect beauty was beginning to fade. As Nami spiraled deeper into despair, an ancient carp named Roku approached her. Roku was enormous, his scales dulled by countless seasons, and his once proud fins now frayed at the edges. Scars from old encounters marked his body, and one of his eyes had grown cloudy with age. Yet there was something about Roku that commanded respect, a dignity that had nothing to do with physical appearance. Young one, Roku said, his voice carrying the depth of deep waters. Why do you swim in such troubled circles? Nami tried to position herself so that her flawed scale was hidden from Roku's view. It is nothing, honored elder, just a small concern about appearance. Roku's cloudy eye seemed to see more clearly than most creatures' perfect vision. Ah, the burden of beauty. I remember it well. You remember being beautiful? Nami asked immediately, regretting the tactless question. Roku chuckled, a sound like water flowing over smooth pebbles. Indeed, I was once considered the most handsome fish in this stretch of river. My scales gleamed like polished silver. My fins were perfectly symmetrical, and my movements were poetry in motion. Nami looked at Roku's weathered form, with new eyes, trying to imagine him as he had described. What happened? Life happened, Roku replied simply. Seasons changed, challenges arose, time passed, and slowly I discovered something wonderful. What could be wonderful about losing your beauty? Roku swam in a slow, graceful circle around Nami, and she noticed that despite his aged appearance, his movements still held a kind of beauty, deeper and more profound than mere physical perfection. I learned that true beauty is not something we possess, but something we express. Not something we have, but something we are. As if to demonstrate his point, Roku began to swim in patterns that seemed to tell a story. His movements spoke of wisdom, gained through experience of strength, earned through struggle of peace, found through acceptance. Watching him, Nami felt a stirring of something she had never experienced before, admiration that had nothing to do with surface appearance. But how can I express beauty if I am no longer beautiful? Nami asked the small dark spot on her scale, seeming to pulse with her distress. Tell me, Roku said gently, when you swim past the young fry, what do they see? Nami thought about the tiny fish, who often gathered to watch her pass. They see someone they hope to become, I suppose. And when you glide through the shallows, where the herons hunt, what happens? The smaller fish follow in my wake. They feel safer when I am near, because the herons focus on me instead of them. And when you surface near the lily pads, where the frogs sing their evening songs. Nami paused, remembering scenes she had never truly considered before. They grow quiet, as if my presence brings them peace. Roku nodded knowingly. You see, your beauty has never been just about your appearance. It has been about the grace you bring to every interaction, the confidence you inspire in others, the peace you carry with you wherever you swim. A school of young fish approached just then, and Nami instinctively tried to hide her imperfect scale. But as they drew near, she saw in their eyes the same admiration she had always received. They were not examining her for flaws. They were simply basking in the presence of someone who moved through the world with grace and dignity. They do not see the spot, Nami realized with wonder. Even if they did, it would not diminish what they learned from watching you, Roku assured her. True beauty is not diminished by imperfection. It is enhanced by authenticity. As the day progressed, Nami began to notice things she had overlooked before. When she swam near the riverbank, the water plants seemed to sway more gracefully in her wake. When she moved through schools of smaller fish, they organized themselves into beautiful formations, inspired by her presence. When she surfaced near the dragonflies, they adjusted their flight patterns to dance with her movements. I've been so focused on being beautiful that I forgot about creating beauty, Nami murmured as understanding dawned. That evening, as the sun painted the water in shades of gold and rose, Nami began to swim differently. Instead of focusing on displaying her perfect form, she focused on moving in harmony with her surroundings. She danced with the current rather than fighting. It worked with the light rather than trying to capture it, and embraced her place in the river's ecosystem rather than standing apart from it. The small dark spot on her scale was still there, and Nami knew that more would appear as time passed. But she also knew that each mark would be a badge of experience, each change a sign of a life fully lived. Her beauty would evolve, but it would never diminish as long as she continued to express it through her actions and her presence. Other fish began to gather, drawn not by her physical perfection, but by the peaceful energy that now radiated from her movements. Young and old, scarred and pristine, they swam together in patterns that created something far more beautiful than any individual could achieve alone. As night settled over the river and the fish began to rest, Nami felt a contentment deeper than any she had known during her days of perfect beauty. She had discovered that true beauty was not a possession to be protected, but a gift to be shared, not a static state to be maintained, but a dynamic force to be expressed. The lesson Nami carried into the peaceful night: real beauty radiates from within and grows more luminous when shared, while the fear of losing our outer perfection only dims the inner light that makes us truly beautiful. Story 8, The Song of Crane Hibari. At the quiet bend of the Zen River, where ancient willows dipped their fingers into the flowing water, and morning mist clung to the reeds like gentle spirits, stood a young crane named Hibari. She was tall and graceful, with feathers of pristine white and legs as slender as bamboo stalks. But unlike the other cranes who moved with confident dignity, Hibari carried herself with hesitation, her movements careful and uncertain. Hibari possessed the most beautiful voice among all the river birds. When she sang, her melodic calls could calm the most turbulent waters and bring peace to the most restless hearts. Yet she rarely allowed others to hear her gift, singing only in the early dawn hours, when she believed the world still slept. The few creatures who had been fortunate enough to catch fragments of her song would speak of it in whispered reverence, calling it the voice of the river itself. The source of Hibari's reluctance lay in a memory from her youth. As a fledgling eager to share her newly discovered voice, she had sung boldly from the highest reed during the morning gathering, but her song had been interrupted by the harsh cry of an old heron named Guraku, who declared that young birds should wait their turn and not presume to lead the dawn chorus until they had earned their place through years of silent observation. The criticism had struck Hibari's tender heart like a stone, and from that day forward, she had retreated into silence during the community gatherings. She convinced herself that her voice was too young, too untrained, too presumptuous to offer to the world. Better to wait, she thought, until she was older, wiser, more worthy of being heard. But seasons had passed, and still Hibari found reasons to delay sharing her gift. Now she told herself she needed more practice, more experience, more certainty that her song would be perfect before she dared to offer it publicly. Meanwhile, her private dawn concerts grew ever more beautiful, though only the mist and the sleeping lilies bore witness to their magic. On this particular morning, as autumn painted the river in shades of amber and gold, Hibari noticed unusual activity along the banks. Animals were gathering from all parts of the river ecosystem, not just the usual residents, but creatures she had never seen before. There were deer from the deep forest rabbits, from the meadows beyond, and even a family of foxes who rarely ventured near the water. Curious despite her shyness, Hibari approached an elderly otter named Kazumi, who was sunning herself on a fallen log. Kazumi was known throughout the river for her wisdom and her knowledge of the natural world's rhythms and seasons. Honored Kazumi, Hibari said softly, her voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of water. Why do so many gather today? Kazumi's whiskers twitched with gentle amusement as she turned toward the young crane. You do not know. Today marks the autumn equinox, when day and night stand in perfect balance. It is the traditional time for the great singing, when all creatures offer their voices to celebrate the harmony of the seasons. Hibari's elegant neck curved downward in dismay. The great singing. I have never heard of such a thing. Ah, Kazumi said with understanding. That is because you have spent so many dawn hours in solitary practice that you have missed the evening gatherings where such traditions are discussed. The great singing happens only once each year, and it is said that when all voices join together in harmony, the river itself awakens to sing with us. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of many voices began to rise from various points along the riverbank. Frogs added their deep bass notes, while smaller birds contributed bright trills and warbles. Fish splashed rhythmically in the shallows, and even the trees seemed to join in, as the wind rustled through their leaves in time with the growing melody. Hibari listened with wonder and growing sadness. The sound was beautiful, but she could hear the spaces where her voice might fit the harmonies that seemed to wait for a contribution she was too afraid to make. She thought of all the mornings she had sung alone, perfecting melodies that no one would ever hear, practicing for a performance she would never give. I should sing with them, Hibari whispered more to herself than to Kazumi. Indeed, you should, the otter agreed. Your voice has been heard by those who rise early, and they have spoken of its beauty. Why do you keep such a gift hidden? Hibari's head drooped further. Because I was told once that I was not ready, that my song was presumptuous. I have been waiting to become worthy of being heard. Kazumi was quiet for a long moment, studying the young crane with eyes that held the depth of many seasons. Tell me, child, who decides when you are worthy? The question surprised Hibari. She had never considered that worthiness might be something she could determine for herself. I suppose the elders, those with more experience, and while you wait for their permission, what happens to your song? Hibari considered this as the community chorus continued to build around them. She realized that in all her years of private practice, her song had brought joy only to herself and the occasional early rising creature who happened to overhear. All the beauty she had cultivated remained locked away, useless to the world. It goes unheard, she admitted. Precisely. And what does the community lose while you wait to be worthy enough to share? As if to answer Kazumi's question, a young frog nearby began to sing with enthusiastic but untrained voice. His notes were not perfect, his timing occasionally off, but his joy was infectious. Other creatures began to sing along with him, and rather than criticizing his imperfections, they helped to support and improve his contribution through their harmonious participation. They are helping him learn by singing with him, Hibari observed with wonder. Yes, Kazumi confirmed. The community does not need perfect voices, it needs willing voices. The harmony comes not from individual perfection, but from the courage to contribute what we have. Just then, the voice Hibari had dreaded to hear rose above the others. Old Garaku, the heron who had silenced her years ago, began to sing with a voice that was strong, but brittle with age. And as Hibari listened, she realized something that changed everything. Garaku's voice, for all its authority, lacked the pure sweetness that could elevate the entire chorus to something transcendent. He needs my voice. Hibari breathed understanding flooding through her like sunrise over water. Without waiting for further encouragement, Hibari spread her wings and launched herself into the air, circling once before landing on a prominent rock in the center of the gathering. The other creatures noticed her arrival, and gradually the singing softened as they sensed something special was about to happen. Hibari opened her beak and released the song she had been perfecting in solitude for so many years. Her voice soared above the water like liquid silver, weaving through the other melodies and binding them together into something greater than the sum of their parts. The harmony that emerged was so beautiful that several animals stopped their own singing just to listen in awe. But Hibari, did not sing alone for long. One by one, the other voices rejoined her, finding their parts in relation to her melody. Even Garaku's weathered voice blended perfectly, providing a foundation that supported Hibari's soaring notes. The old heron met her eyes across the water, and in his gaze she saw not criticism, but gratitude and respect. As the great singing reached its crescendo, something magical happened. The river itself began to hum its flowing waters, creating a resonant undertone that amplified every voice. The very stones seemed to vibrate in harmony, and the air itself became music made manifest. When the song finally ended, the silence that followed was profound and sacred. Every creature present knew they had been part of something extraordinary, something that could only happen when all voices joined together without fear or reservation. Garaku approached Hibari as the gathering began to disperse his ancient eyes, bright with an emotion she had never seen there before. "Young one," he said, his voice gentle now, rather than harsh. "I owe you an apology. Years ago I silenced your song because I feared it would overshadow my own. I was wrong to let my insecurity deprive the community of your gift." Hibari felt a weight lift from her heart that she had carried for so long she had forgotten it was there. "And I was wrong to let your words silence me for so many seasons. We both lost something precious in those years." "Indeed," Garaku agreed. "But perhaps the lesson is more valuable for having been learned through loss. Your song has reminded me that harmony is not about one voice leading, but about all voices finding their perfect place together." As night settled over the river, and the last of the gathering dispersed to their homes, Hibari remained on her rock, feeling the gentle current flowing beneath her feet. She thought about all the dawn songs she had sung in solitude, all the practice that had prepared her for this moment, all the years of waiting that had finally led to this perfect offering. She realized that her time of private practice had not been wasted. It had been necessary preparation for the gift she was meant to share. But she also understood that preparation without performance was incomplete, like a flower that blooms in darkness where no one can see its beauty. From this night forward, Hibari promised herself she would sing not just in the solitude of dawn, but whenever her voice was needed. She would trust that the community would help her grow and improve, just as her song would help to elevate their collective harmony. The lesson Hibari carried into the starlit night. Our gifts are not meant to be hoarded until they are perfect, but shared as they grow, for it is through the courage to offer what we have that both we and our community discover what we might become together. Story 9. The Current of Leaf Momiji. In the gentle embrace of the Zen River's winding course, where water carved patient paths through ancient stones and time moved like honey through golden afternoon light, floated a single maple leaf named Momiji. She was dressed in the vibrant colors of deep autumn crimson edges, bleeding into gold, with veins of burnished orange that caught the sunlight like tiny flames. Momiji had recently released her hold on the great tree that had been her home, beginning the journey that all leaves must eventually take. Unlike the other fallen leaves that drifted passively with the current, Momiji found herself fighting against the river's flow. She had grown accustomed to the control that came with being attached to her branch, the ability to dance with the wind, while remaining securely anchored, to choose which way to face the sun, to decide when to rustle and when to be still. Now surrendered to the water's will, she felt helpless and afraid. Momiji twisted and turned, trying to steer herself toward the calmer eddies near the bank, where she might find purchase on a rock or tangle in the roots of a riverside plant. But each time she seemed to gain some control over her direction, the current would catch her again and carry her further downstream into unknown waters. Why must I go where I do not wish to go? Momiji cried out to the river, her voice barely a whisper above the gentle murmur of flowing water. From the depths below, a wise old turtle named Enzo heard her distress. Enzo had lived in the river for more decades than most creatures could count, and he had watched countless leaves make this same journey. He understood both the fear and the beauty of letting go. Rising slowly to the surface, Enzo positioned himself beside the struggling leaf. "Young one," he said gently, his voice carrying the patient rhythm of deep waters. "Why do you fight so hard against that which carries you?" Momiji paused in her struggles, grateful for any conversation that might distract her from her fear. "I do not know where this current leads. I want to choose my own path, to have some say in my destination." Enzo nodded with understanding, his ancient eyes reflecting the afternoon sky. "And where would you choose to go if you could control your journey?" The question caught Momiji off guard. In all her struggling, she had focused so intently on resisting the current that she had not actually considered what alternative she desired. I suppose I would want to return to my tree, to the safety of what I knew." "Ah," Enzo said thoughtfully, "but that path is no longer available to you. The tree has released you, and you cannot reattach yourself to the branch that was your home." Momiji felt a pang of sadness as she acknowledged this truth. Her connection to the tree had been severed by natural law, not by choice. There was no going back, only forward into the unknown. "Then I would choose to stay in the quiet pools," she said after a moment. "Places where the water is still, and I could rest without being pushed onward." Enzo's expression grew gentle but serious. "I have seen many leaves try to cling to the quiet places. They become trapped in stagnant backwaters, slowly decaying without purpose. Is that truly the fate you would choose?" As if to illustrate his point, they passed a small inlet where several leaves from previous seasons had collected. They were brown and brittle, slowly dissolving into the mud, forgotten and purposeless. Momiji shuddered at the sight. "But I am afraid of where the current might take me," she admitted, her voice small and vulnerable. Enzo swam closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "Tell me, little leaf, what do you fear most about this journey?" Momiji considered the question carefully. "I fear that I will be swept away from everything familiar, that I will be alone in strange waters, that I will be battered against rocks, or lost in rapids I cannot navigate." "And what if," Enzo asked gently, "instead of these fears you discovered that the current knows exactly where you need to go?" Before Momiji could respond, they rounded a bend in the river and encountered a sight that took her breath away. A family of young ducks was struggling against a strong cross-current, the ducklings growing tired as they tried to follow their mother to the safety of the far shore. The mother duck called out in distress, unable to help her babies overcome the challenging water. Without thinking, Momiji positioned herself between the current and the smallest duckling, her broad surface creating a small windbreak that allowed the baby bird to rest for a moment and regain strength. The duckling chirped gratefully before continuing on with renewed energy, safely reaching the shore with its family. "Did you plan to help them?" Enzo asked quietly. Momiji realized with surprise that she had acted purely on instinct, guided by the same current she had been fighting moments before. "No, I simply found myself in the right place at the right time. Or perhaps," Enzo suggested, "the current brought you to exactly where you were needed." As they continued downstream, Momiji began to notice other moments where her presence seemed to serve a purpose. Her bright colors caught the attention of a lonely frog, bringing a moment of beauty to its evening. Her gentle movement through the water created small ripples that helped to aerate a stagnant pool, bringing life to the aquatic plants below. When she passed over a school of small fish, her shadow provided them with protection from a hunting bird above. I never realized, Momiji murmured with growing wonder, that my journey could be meaningful to others. Enzo smiled, his weathered features radiating satisfaction. The river has carried countless leaves before you, and it will carry countless more after. Each one becomes part of the river's greater purpose, whether they understand it or not. But those who learn to trust the current often discover that their journey becomes richer and more meaningful than anything they could have planned for themselves. As the evening approached and the water grew darker, Momiji felt a fundamental shift in her understanding. Instead of fighting against the current, she began to move with it, feeling its pulse and rhythm, learning to read its subtle changes and respond with grace rather than resistance. To her surprise, this cooperation did not make her more helpless. It made her more skillful. By working with the current rather than against it, she found she could influence her path in small but meaningful ways. She could catch favorable flows, avoid obstacles more easily, and position herself to help other creatures she encountered along the way. It is like dancing, Momiji realized with delight, but with a partner who knows the steps better than I do. Enzo nodded approvingly. The river has been dancing this dance for thousands of years. When you learn to follow its lead, you become part of something far greater than yourself. A school of minnows swam beneath them, and Momiji noticed how they moved together in perfect synchronization, each fish responding to the subtle movements of the others and the flow of the water around them. They were individuals, yet they moved as one, creating patterns of incredible beauty and efficiency. They trust each other, Momiji observed, and they trust the water. Yes, Enzo confirmed, and in that trust they find both safety and purpose. As the night deepened and stars began to reflect on the water's surface, Momiji felt a peace she had never known during her days on the tree. She was still the same leaf, with the same brilliant colors and delicate structure, but she was now part of something dynamic and alive in a way that static attachment could never provide. Other leaves joined the current around her, some new to the journey, others more experienced. Instead of competing for position or struggling for control, they began to move together, creating a beautiful flotilla of autumn colors, drifting peacefully downstream. "Where will we go?" asked a young oak leaf who had just joined their group. "Where the river takes us," Momiji replied, surprised by the confidence in her own voice. "And wherever that is, it will be exactly where we are meant to be." Enzo, who had been quietly accompanying their group, smiled with deep satisfaction. "Now you understand the river's greatest teaching," he said, as he prepared to return to the depths. "True freedom comes not from controlling our destination, but from trusting the current that carries us and finding our purpose in the journey itself." As dawn approached and Enzo disappeared beneath the surface, Momiji continued her journey with a heart full of gratitude. She had learned that surrender was not defeat, but wisdom, that trust was not naivety, but courage, and that the most beautiful journeys often begin when we stop fighting and start flowing. The lesson Momiji carried on the gentle current life's greatest adventures unfold not when we force our own path, but when we trust the natural flow and discover our purpose in serving others along the way. Story 10, The Dream of Firefly Yume. In the twilight hours, when day surrenders to night, and the Zen River becomes a mirror for the first emerging stars, lived a small firefly named Yumi. She dwelt among the cattails and water reeds that line the river's peaceful banks, in a community of fireflies who each evening painted the darkness with their gentle pulsing lights. Yume was different from her companions in one significant way: her light had never appeared. While other fireflies her age had long since discovered their inner glow and joined the nightly dance of illumination, Yume remained dark. She had tried everything she could think of to coax forth her light, concentrating with all her might, mimicking the breathing patterns of her glowing friends, even eating different combinations of the tiny insects that were said to enhance a firefly's luminescence. Nothing had worked. Each evening, as her community rose into the air to begin their enchanted ballet of lights, Yume would remain among the reeds, watching with a mixture of wonder and profound sadness. The sight was breathtakingly beautiful. Dozens of tiny stars, weaving patterns through the air above the water, creating a living constellation that reflected in the river's surface and doubled the magic of the display. But Yume felt like an observer of life rather than a participant in it. She longed to join the dance, to contribute her own light to the collective beauty, to feel the joy that seemed to radiate from her glowing companions as they spiraled and dove through the warm evening air. "Perhaps my light will come tomorrow," Yume would whisper to herself each night as she settled among the protective cattails. But tomorrow would come, and still she remained dark. On this particular evening, as summer's warmth caressed the river and the air hummed with the peaceful sounds of creatures settling into their nighttime rhythms, Yume noticed an unusual disturbance in the water. A young frog named Kappa was struggling near the riverbank, apparently caught in a tangle of fishing line that some careless human had left behind. Kappa's distress calls were barely audible over the gentle splash of water, and in the growing darkness, the other creatures could not see his predicament. The fireflies were too high above to notice busy with their nightly celebration, and the fish were too deep below to hear his cries. Without hesitation, Yume flew toward the struggling frog. Though she could not provide light to guide her way, she had spent so many evenings observing from the shadows that her navigation in darkness had become extraordinary. She could sense the slightest movement in the air, feel the vibrations of Kappa's struggles, and navigate by the subtle differences in the night's sounds and scents. When she reached Kappa, Yume could see the problem clearly. The fishing line had wrapped around his back leg, and each time he tried to swim to safety, the line tightened, pulling him back toward a submerged branch, where he might become permanently trapped. "Hold still," Yume called softly. "Let me help you." Using her small but nimble claws, Yume began to work at the knots in the fishing line. It was delicate work, requiring patience and precision. In the darkness, she relied entirely on touch-feeling each loop and twist of the line as she carefully loosened the trap that held Kappa prisoner. "I cannot see you clearly," Kappa gasped between his efforts to stay afloat. "But I can feel your help. Who are you?" "I am Yume," she replied, continuing her careful work. "I am a firefly who does not glow." "A firefly who does not glow?" Kappa asked with surprise. "But you move through this darkness as if you carry the light of the stars themselves." Yume paused in her work, struck by Kappa's words. She had never thought of her ability to navigate in darkness as a form of light, but as she considered it, she realized that her comfort in the shadows had indeed become a kind of illumination, not visible to others, perhaps, but real nonetheless. "There," she said as the last knot came free, and Kappa's leg was released from the fishing line. "You are free now." Kappa swam to the safety of the shallows, then turned back toward Yume, with gratitude shining in his large eyes. "Thank you, Yume, who moves like light in the darkness. You have saved my life tonight." As Kappa disappeared into the reeds, Yume felt something stirring within her chest. Not the physical sensation she had always imagined would accompany her first glow, but something deeper and more subtle. It was a warmth that seemed to come from the act of helping itself, a brightness that had nothing to do with visible light. Just then, an ancient voice called softly from the water below. "Young firefly, please come closer." Yume looked down to see an enormous old turtle surfacing near the bank. This was Aishin, the eldest creature in the river, said to be so old that he remembered when the first fireflies came to live along these banks. Honored Aishin, Yumi said, flying down to hover near the water's surface. Did you see what happened with Kappa? Indeed I did. Aishin replied, his voice carrying the weight of countless seasons. And I have been watching you for many evenings, little one. I have seen your sadness at being unable to join the dance of lights. Yume's heart sank. It is true. I am the only firefly who cannot glow. I do not understand why I was made different, why I cannot contribute to the beauty that my community creates each night. Yishin's ancient eyes reflected the starlight as he studied the small firefly. Tell me, child, what do you believe light is for? The question surprised Yum. To create beauty, I suppose. To dance with others. To shine brightly in the darkness. Those are some uses of light, Aishin agreed. But what is its deepest purpose? Yume thought carefully, remembering her evening among the reeds, watching her community's nightly display. To help others see. Yes, Aishin said with approval. Light serves by revealing what is hidden, by guiding others safely through the darkness, by showing the way forward when the path is unclear. As if summoned by their conversation, the community of fireflies began to descend from their aerial dance, their lights twinkling like fallen stars as they settled among the reeds for the night. But something was wrong. Several of the younger fireflies were calling out in distress. We cannot find little Hoshi, one of them cried. She was with us during the dance, but when we came down to rest, she was not among us. The adult fireflies immediately took to the air again, their lights scanning the area around the river. But their bright glows, while beautiful, were not suited for detailed searching. The light they created was diffuse and dancing perfect for celebration, but difficult to focus for precision work. Yume listened to the search efforts, her heart going out to the lost young firefly, and then using the same skills that had helped her rescue Kappa, she began to move systematically through the darkness, listening for the faintest sounds, feeling for the slightest disturbances in the air. While the other fireflies searched with their lights blazing, Yum navigated by touch and sound and scent, covering areas they could not reach, checking spaces too small for their glowing bodies to enter. She moved like a shadow with purpose, invisible but effective. Finally, in a narrow space between two large stones near the water's edge, Yume heard the faintest whimper. There was little Hoshi, who had become wedged in a crevice while trying to retrieve a flower petal that had caught her fancy. She was unhurt, but thoroughly stuck, too frightened to call loudly for help. Hoshi, Yumi called softly, it is Yum. I am here to help you. Yum. Hoshi's voice was small and scared. But I cannot see you. Are you glowing? No, Yum replied as she began to work on freeing the trapped firefly. But I can see you clearly. Sometimes the most important work happens in the spaces between the lights. As Yumi carefully helped Hoshi work free from the crevice, the lost firefly began to understand something remarkable. You found me when no one else could, Hoshi whispered with awe. You are like a different kind of light, one that shows up where the other lights cannot reach. When Yumi finally guided Hoshi back to the worried community, the reunion was joyful beyond words. The adult fireflies surrounded their missing member with grateful glows, and Hoshi quickly told them how Yum had found her in the darkness. She is a light that does not glow, Hoshi explained excitedly, but she can find lost things and help creatures in trouble. As the community settled down for the night, many of the fireflies approached Yume to thank her and to express their wonder at her unique abilities. For the first time, Yumi felt truly part of the community, not despite her differences, but because of them. Aishin, who had watched the entire rescue from his position in the water, called Yumi back to him as the night grew deep and peaceful.
"Do you understand now, little one?" he asked gently.
Yume settled on a lily pad near the old turtle, her heart full of a new kind of brightness. "I think so. I am not broken or incomplete. I am simply a different kind of light, one that serves in different ways." "Precisely," Aishin confirmed. "Some lights are made to dance and celebrate, to create beauty and inspire joy. Others are made to search and rescue, to find the lost and help the struggling. Both are necessary, both are valuable, both are forms of illumination." As dawn approached and the fireflies prepared to rest, through the daylight hours, Yume felt a peace deeper than any she had ever known. She no longer mourned her lack of visible light, for she had discovered that she possessed something equally precious, the ability to bring help to those in darkness, to find what was lost, to serve in the quiet spaces where celebration could not reach. The other fireflies had begun to speak of her as the night guardian, the one who watched over the community while they danced, who could navigate dangers they could not see, who served as their protector in the darkness. It was a role she embraced with joy and pride. In the gentle pre-dawn light, as Yume settled into her resting place among the cattails, she thought about all the different kinds of light in the world. There was the bright light of the sun, the gentle light of the moon, the dancing light of her firefly companions, and her own quiet light, invisible but real, serving in the shadows, illuminating by action rather than glow. She realized that she had been searching for the wrong kind of brightness all along. True illumination, she now understood, was not about how brightly one could shine, but about how effectively one could serve, not about being seen, but about helping others to see, not about dancing in the light, but about being a beacon in the darkness. The lesson Yume carried into the peaceful dawn. We each possess our own unique form of light, and sometimes the most important illumination comes not from blazing brightly, but from quietly serving in the places where other lights cannot reach. As the Zen River continued its eternal journey toward the sea, carrying with it the stories of all who dwelt along its banks, the 10 tales became part of the water's own memory. Each creature had discovered that wisdom flows like the river itself, not in a straight line, but in gentle curves that embrace all who are ready to learn. In the end, peace comes not from having all the answers, but from trusting the current of life to carry us exactly where we need to be, when we need to be there, with exactly the gifts we are meant to share along the way.